Welcome everyone to our Venus retrograde class in Aries Pisces. Before we get started on this class material, first of all, those good old housekeeping slides that some of you might be familiar with. Here at EAN, you can study with us 3 different ways: through our free weekly audio podcast, our astral library, and of course our multimedia course. Here's a slide on the astral library. This is a dozen plus years of materials we've gathered by myself and other evolutionary astrologers and webinars, conferences, workshops, blah, blah. You can get one of these sections or all sections for 1 month, 6 months, 12 months, or you can do a monthly recurring that you can cancel at any time. You can go to our website and find more information. I think we even have a listing of what the titles are in each one of these sections that you can peruse before you would subscribe. Our multimedia course is 3 segments. Of course, you can see on your screen. Segments 1 and 2 are available 2 different ways: by materials, which is the binders and the DVDs through the mail, or digital only, which is everything via your internet device, or you can get it both ways. And then, of course, you see segment 3. If you're new to evolutionary astrology and you have any questions, you're always welcome to contact Leroy at 605-348-5111, or you can email him, mediamonk@evolutionaryastrology.net. And so here we are with a soon-to-be Venus retrograde cycle. As you can see, Venus will be retrograde March 4th through April 15th of 2017. It goes retrograde at 13 degrees Aries, and it will go direct at about 27 degrees Pisces. As I was prepping for tonight's class, I ran across this author. I have no idea who she is, but I was just Googling warrior goddess, because when we look at a Venus retrograde in Aries, that's some of the words that'll be used. The Amazon warrior, the warrior goddess. In other words, it's that blend of the feminine Venus and masculine Aries. Her quote: "Being a warrior goddess means being comfortable with both your power and your vulnerability, knowing they are both strengths." And of course, the author of the book and the quote is Heather Ash Amara, I think it is. WarriorGoddessTrainingBook.com if you want to get more information on her. Here are the dates of Venus's direct retrograde passage. Direct passage. Pisces to Aries, back to Pisces, Aries again. You can see right here, we've already moved past February 3rd of Venus in Pisces, and then it went into Aries, turning retrograde at that 13 degrees, and it's going to be in Aries through April 2nd, when it goes back into Pisces through the 28th, and then Aries again April 28th through June 6th. 57 days in Pisces, 97 days in Aries. In other words, Venus will be 5 months and just 2 signs of the zodiac. It's a long time, because when Venus is moving full speed direct, it will barely spend 3 weeks in one sign of the zodiac. So this really slows down its orbit when it's doing a retrograde cycle. Venus has a revolution around the sun, 225 days. Through the zodiac, it's anywhere from 9 to 14 months. Due to the retrograde, it will lengthen it up. Venus is one of the rare retrograde cycles, retrograde approximately 7% of the time. Venus goes retrograde once every year and a half for somewhere between 40 to 43 days. When it stands still, going retrograde and direct, it's stationary periods. Those are 2 days each. And of course, as I said before, we're going to have Venus 5 months in 2 signs this retrograde cycle. Many of you might be familiar with the fact that every 8 years we'll have 5 Venus retrograde cycles, and they'll make a 5-pointed star in the sky or the zodiac or your chart. That's known as a pentagram. And what happens is each retrograde cycle starts 2 to 3 days earlier on that 8-year point, and 2 to 3 degrees earlier in the zodiac. I'll show you some visuals on this. It takes 104 years for Venus to reverse through any sign of the zodiac on each of those 5 points of the pentagram. Here's a visual. Right now, the Venus retrograde cycles are taking place in Aries, Pisces. The next one's going to be in Scorpio, Libra, then Gemini, then Aquarius, Capricorn, then Leo, Virgo, before we start over again with Aries, Pisces. Here's the dates. Venus was previously retrograde in Aries, Pisces. You can follow these dates backwards if you want to. You can ponder some of the things that were going on in your life to see if you can catch your own personal cycle at this point of the pentagram and the Venus retrograde cycle. And of course, that 104 years to reverse through a sign became the Sleeping Beauty fairy tale. It's the 100-year sleep cycle we read about. I don't know if Rip Van Winkle was 100 years or not, but I do know that this relates very well to the Sleeping Beauty fairy tale. Here was the last Venus retrograde cycle in Aries Pisces, and I thought this was quite interesting. Venus went retrograde back in 2009. You can just see here how the dates come just a couple of days earlier, direct a couple of days earlier. You can see how last time it started 15.5 Aries. Now we're 13. We, last Venus retrograde cycle, were working through either the euphoria or the upset, depending upon your political persuasion, of Obama being elected for the first time. It was the beginnings of the Affordable Health Care Act, or what we know as Obamacare. And those who were in opposition to it then became the beginnings of the Tea Party resistance. Again, Venus initiations in Aries. In the retrograde review in Aries to Pisces, what to initiate based upon our beliefs or our philosophies. Well, here we are 8 years later, having euphoria or upset with Trump being elected, depending upon our political persuasions. Will we really have the repeal and replace of health care? And you could substitute all kinds of social, financial, military, there's all kinds of issues that we could replace right here. And as we've seen this resistance that has been going on with the Women's March that happened the day after the inauguration, is this going to be the beginnings of a progressive resistance that we don't really have a coalition of a label for? But I thought it was just quite interesting to take you back 8 years to let you see how we have these same archetypes and they're almost like polar opposites, and how they manifested from the last Aries Pisces retrograde cycle 8 years ago to this one that's coming up. Stay tuned, it's yet to be written. Now let's look forward to the next cycle of Aries Pisces retrogrades, which isn't going to occur until 2025, and you can see the dates there. Now I'm going to remind you, Pluto is going to leave Capricorn and go into Aquarius 2023-24. It's going to be in Aquarius for 20 years. Pluto is in Capricorn for 15 years. We're really seeing the concentrations of the powerful and the political and financial elite with Pluto in Capricorn. Stay tuned through the second half of this 15-year cycle. There's more to be written. But this next coming Venus in Aries Pisces retrograde cycle, it's going to have Venus making 3 conjunctions to Saturn, 3 conjunctions to Neptune, 2 of them in Pisces. Third one will be early Aries. And Venus will also conjunct the North Node 3 times as it moves into Pisces. We are just finishing up the opposite nodal axis cycles, South Node Pisces, North Node Virgo. By the time we get to this future Venus retrograde cycle, at this point of the pentagram, again, the nodes will have flipped. So you can see that whatever happens in this cycle is going to have a strong theme that's going to carry forward and be yet to write around these whole themes of endings, Pisces, and beginnings, Aries, and the review of that. I'll have more on the political perspectives as we get further into our podcast. So let's just review this here for a moment. I got a lot of slides to go through. I surprised myself with what I put together. So I'm talking a little fast, but you can see it on your screen. You're going to have the PDF to observe again. You're going to have the recording to listen to. If you have any questions, you can always type your questions in the Q&A area to Leroy. He'll answer as best as he can. You're always welcome to interrupt me if you have questions you don't understand, you want an example. Leroy will answer as best as he can again, and if not, he'll interrupt me. So here's these 3 cycles that I just spoke about. This last one with Obama election and the Tea Party and Obamacare, the one we're having now, and of course the one into the future with the conjunctions we just saw. Now, if you happen to have any signs in cardinal modality, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, between 8 to 18 degrees, you're going to have conjunction, squares, opposition aspects with this Venus retrograde cycle. Venus will be more active in your chart. If you have mutable modality signs, which is, well, in this case from Aries, is going to be Leo and Sagittarius between 22 to 30 degrees, you're going to, no, wait a minute, I'll take that back. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself to the trines. Going back 22 to 30 degrees in mutable, which is Gemini, Virgo, Sag, Pisces. You too, when Venus retrogrades back into Pisces, will have the hard aspects going on. It's the elements that are going to have the trine aspects. 8 to 18 degrees with Aries, Leo, Sag, going to have conjunctions and trines. And 22 to 30 degrees with Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces, you'll have conjunction or trine aspects. These are going to be the harsher ones. These are going to be the easier ones to understand and integrate if an effort is made. So you can refer to your own chart with this if you want to. Venus mythology. This is from Daniel Giamario with his shamanic astrology, which I discovered about 20 years ago. He was one of the most popular astrologers. He calls himself a shamanic astrologer. He was one of the first ones and most popular ones to write about this shamanic or visual cycle of Venus in the sky. Who has not noticed Venus in the evening sky out there so bright over the last few months? And if you've been really looking, you could see the Venus conjunctions to Mars, Mars being to the left and higher up than Venus. And as a matter of fact, if you are listening to this podcast and you can go outside in a clear sky, this recording February 27th and tomorrow February 28th, you can see a sliver of the new moon with Mars and Venus. I would recommend you get out there and look at it. But Venus has a 584-day cycle before it comes back around to that point on the pentagram where it last was. And we usually start this cycle with the heliacal rising of Venus during the retrograde, when Venus starts first rising as a morning star. And Venus will be there as a morning star for approximately 8 to 9 months. Now with this Venus retrograde cycle, this heliacal rising is going to be March 29th, at about 2.5 degrees Aries. So whatever that rising sign is, that is the sign of the zodiac that will rule this 19-month or 584-day cycle of Venus. And of course, this one is Aries. So the next 19 months is the warrior goddess, or the Amazon goddess. It is more aggressive Venus going after what we want. Now, typically, there will be 7 and sometimes 8 waning moon Venus morning conjunctions. In other words, you got to be up before sunrise, the opposite of what we've been rising. Venus rises above or earlier than the sun, and she appears to disappear into the underworld because the sun gets too bright. As a morning star, these conjunctions are known as the gates or chakras of Venus releasing a vestment at each gate. This is Venus dying to its old self, and it then culminates in Venus descending into the underworld for 60 to 90 days, 2 to 3 months. And Venus will have what's known as that exterior conjunction where Venus is moving direct, but Venus is on the opposite side of the sun. The sun is in between. Whereas as we look at this Venus retrograde cycle, the interior conjunction, when Venus is retrograde, Venus is in the middle with Earth and Sun on either side. But this morning star Venus is known as death by intent, the old to release. And after Venus has been behind the sun or in that underworld 6 to 8 months, then Venus starts in the second half of the cycle, which is the evening star Venus, where she has been the last 8 to 9 months. This is the cycle we're just finishing up. Again, we start to see Venus in that evening sky as she moves far enough away from the sun that we can see it as it gets dark. There will be 7, sometimes 8 Moon-Venus conjunctions in the evening sky. As a matter of fact, the Venus-Moon conjunctions that are going to be happening today, and you can still see it tomorrow, this is going to be number 8. Sometimes it's just enough time with the lunar cycles that we can get 8 of these conjunctions in. But the evening Moon-Venus conjunctions, Venus is gathering a vestment or gathering wisdom and knowledge and insight with each one of these. And so here we are at this point where we're just getting ready to start the next Venus retrograde cycle. But here, for the last 8, 9 months, Venus has been doing a rebirth by intent. And if we look back to the last point, the last heliacal rising of Venus was in Leo. The tail, she's almost finished up with Virgo, and so that heliacal rising was Leo. We're just finishing up with this evening star gathering wisdom cycle in Leo and creativity. Again, the next one is going to be Aries, as we saw before. So I thought, again, I have followed these 2 slides that I've showed you here for almost a couple of decades. I don't remember when I started following it. I love Venus as an evening star, and so here's some of the symbology that has been put together around this from, again, Daniel Giamario. Archetypal Venus. Venus at this point rules 2 signs. The inner side of Venus is the ruler of Taurus in the 2nd house, passive fixed earth. This is the archetype of self-acceptance. You see the words here, I'm going to go fast: self-love, self-sex, the survival instinct, food, clothing, shelter. And when we get beyond that, we get to those resources beyond survival, which are the more luxurious resources, the accumulation of resources, beauty, art, money. It is our self as a resource. It is self-reliance on every level: physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. Of course, this is where we get the values and our essential needs. We must learn to have inner outer relationship with ourself, and whatever we value becomes a need, which then becomes a desire, which is the polarity Scorpio 8th house. Venus side, the inner side with Taurus 2nd house, also rules all the physical senses: touch, smell, taste, sight, hearing. Just a few distortions to this archetype. We can hoard, we can be stubborn, possessive, we can overindulge, we can have poverty, either choosing it through guilt or being forced into it for guilt. We can have prostitution, isolation, overly materialistic here. We also have the outer side of Venus, its rulership of Libra in the 7th house. Here we have active cardinal air. So now we move into relationships outside of self. This is where we learn relationship diversity, leading back to self-knowledge, Aries 1st house polarity. So here's where we're always comparing and contrasting ourselves with others to learn this is who I am and this is who I'm not. This is where we bring in that psychology of listening. How can we have relationship with anyone outside of ourselves if we do not know how to listen and share with them? And when we do that, then we learn how to give to another according to what they need, not what we want to project onto them. So the Libra 7th house side is giving and receiving, learning to do it from a fair and equitable perspective. And this includes when to give and when to not give. And of course, that not giving can sometimes be the greater giving. Fairness and equality in general is with this archetype because we are initiating the 2nd half of the zodiac. Distortions, inequality, codependency, projections, expectations, idealism, masks, lack of boundaries, extremism, philanderer, possessive, needy. Why planetary retrogrades? It's a geocentric or earth-centered phenomenon of apparent motion from our perspective here on Earth. Retrogrades are always a more powerful time for the planetary archetype because it's so close to Earth. Again, in the case of Venus, Venus is going to be between the Earth and the Sun when it makes that retrograde conjunction. That's why it only goes into that underworld for a little over a week, because it's so close to Earth. It gets out on either side of the Sun fast enough where we can see it as it finishes up as an evening star and becomes the morning star with that heliacal rising. Planetary retrogrades cause a withdrawal from status quo to redefine that archetype according to our own individual natural law. We're throwing off the consensus. Status quo gives strong clues to the kinds of compensation we'll make for each planetary archetype. And we'll do this via sign house aspects, the evolutionary state of the soul, and of course the environmental conditionings that the soul has evolved from. Early childhood, teenager, young adult, middle age, older age, etc., etc. And I'll say this in another slide, but you can just think for a moment where your natal Venus is by sign and house. You might know some of your major Venus aspects. You're still going to be reviewing that natal archetype through any and all Venus retrograde cycles. Now, that principle of psychological compensation is being out of sync with your own true essence or nature. Now, almost all of us have psychological compensations in order to appear normal. They can take place anywhere there is dissatisfaction in our world. There is the consensus pressure to be like everybody else and will feel dissatisfied. I don't want to do relationships like everybody else. I want to do relationships differently, says my Venus, but we may not have that courage to do that. So we suppress that dissatisfaction and we pretend to be like others. We pretend to do relationships like everybody else does. So when we have a Venus retrograde, then it's going to offer us that opportunity to break free from consensus relationship patterns, from our conditioning patterns, and learn our own natural ways of how we want to relate within and without Taurus Libra. Of course, the answers to a retrograde lesson always come from within. Planetary retrogrades always point us inward to reflect, to do all the re-words, to revisit, to review, to, take your pick. Now, a retrograde planetary archetype, whether by transit or natal, is non-static. It's always throwing off the past, so it's in a perpetual state of evolving. The sign and house of the planetary retrograde will define the manifestation. The opposite sign and house will provide that objectivity, the clarity and expression. So again, as I said earlier, a transiting planetary retrograde, in this case Venus, will always relate back to that natal planetary archetype, your natal Venus. For those who were born with Venus retrograde, again, 7% of the time, doesn't happen quite often, they will experience a temporary harmony during a Venus retrograde cycle. Now, Venus retrograde in general will bring about new ways of relating to ourselves, inner Taurus, and others, outer Libra. Status quo relating patterns no longer work. All types of relationships undergo change. All types of relationships, not just intimate. There will be an individual alienation. We will turn inward to discover what are our own unique evolving values that then evolve what we perceive we need. We turn inward to learn how to love ourselves in new ways and to accept ourselves in new ways. We reach inward for new levels of self-reliance, that Taurus word, that then allows us to evolve our talents, what we can do to survive and create those resources, and what we can do in achieving an accumulation of those resources. Capricorn archetype trine to Taurus. Venus retrograde will also bring social alienation. Alienation, right? In other words, we start questioning how we want to relate to others and how we put our life together via relationships in the world. So re-evaluating our relationships with others one-on-one. We're also going to reevaluate our collective relationships, those collective value systems. Who has not been pondering what's important to them right now in the U.S.? Thank you. I'm using a U.S. example here. As we watch this new Trump administration coming out with the immigration ban to 7 Muslim countries, the take your pick. I mean, as you look at these announcements, who's not being thrown topsy-turvy if you had a health issue that allowed you to get Obamacare? So this Venus retrograde is going to intensify everything that's being stirred up in this new administration, just like it did for the conservatives 8 years ago when Obama was elected. So also, in general, If you have Venus retrograde natally, you're going to have a lifetime rebelling against your inner relationship with self, your outer relationship with others, and your social relationships with your collective groups. Jeffrey Green always used to say that someone who has Venus retrograde natally is attracted to Aquarian type people, people who have a lot of Aquarius or 11th house or strong Uranus aspects in their chart, because those types of people are rebels in general. And so Venus doesn't settle for the status quo in relationships. They need someone who can rebel with them in relationships. So if you're one of those natal Venus retrograde people, recognize that. If you're a counseling astrologer, remember this when you see clients who have Venus retrograde in their natal chart. Now, Venus retrograde in general, of course, will distort all of these Venusian archetypes that we've talked about so far. And what does it do? It can so easily bring out the issues of jealousy and defensiveness, possessiveness, control, neediness, role inequality. Just think of all of your Taurus, Libra archetype words that you can distort. And a Venus retrograde will expand them in general. And what it's really doing is exposing these distortions so that we can hopefully turn inward and heal them and create better relationship with ourself, Taurus, that then allows us to turn around and create better relationship with others as well. Here's another quote from the Heather Ash Amara. If you don't love and honor yourself with every fiber of your being, if you struggle with owning your power and passion, then it is time for an inner revolution. It is time to claim your warrior goddess energy. To me, this was a perfect quote of Venus retrograde in Aries. It's really asking us to empower ourselves and to do it inwardly through this retrograde, so we then know how to be ourselves and go forward with our own power and passion. Review back into Pisces. We'll get more into that in more details of how that will bring in that passion. So, as we look at Venus retrograde in Aries, which again, if you remember, I'm going to just give you your dates. Venus went into Aries February 3rd. It's been slowing down. It's going to stand still through March 3rd, 4th, 5th this weekend. And then it's going to reverse through Aries to April 2nd. And then it'll come back April 28th to June 6th. So these are the dates as you look at this. Review of new beginnings in our values and desires. Venus is values, Mars is desires. Venus in Aries. Review retrograde. There can be frustration and anger increases because Aries energy always wants to act, move, initiate instead of doing the retrograde reflections. So increases in anger and frustration. We, decrease in patience. Even through the retrograde, there can be this tendency to act before thinking. We can want to have our own way. It's me, 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 me. We can go to the extremes of this retrograde Venus in Aries and insist that it's my way or the highway. So it will really challenge patience in our relationships and the ability to listen. We get triggered, we get frustrated, and we just want to, burst out, yell, walk off in a huff, whatever. If we're going to be on the selfish end of the spectrum, we can just refuse to even acknowledge others, let alone listen to them. If we're on the selfless end of the spectrum, this retrograde cycle will push us to speak up, to stand up. We can't be a doormat anymore. We're so frustrated we can't let someone run over us anymore. And of course, we can vacillate ourselves, our partners, others we relate to. Everybody can vacillate between the selfishness and selflessness. We're going to review equality in all types of relationships. There will be rebellion in general relationship restrictions. Think of our collective relationships. Think of the frustration you might be having right now if you're on a more liberal perspective of how intensely frustrated and angry you get at the things that are knocking down social progress. I mentioned to Leroy on our daily walk and talk today, I says, you know, honey, I've been swearing more since the election. I think I've been swearing more since Venus went into retrograde, since Venus went into Aries as well. I'm finding myself needing to take more deep breaths and slow down and try and do that Libra polarity, attach and objectify, blah, blah. So a lot of our current political polarities can increase. Issue after issue can become more extremely polarized because the Libra energy that wants to be, connect, merge versus that Aries energy that wants to just exclude, throw it off, bust out, don't restrict my freedoms and my way to get what I want. Can you see how this is going to be expanded through this retrograde cycle? We're going to have the rebellion in our intimate relationships as well. And anywhere we're perceiving a relationship to be restricting our freedoms to do what we want or get our needs met. There can be abrupt changes in relationships. We can have endings occur in relationships. We can easily attract in old lovers from the past. Are they going to start again, or is it an opportunity to clean up something that was not resolved when the previous relationship ended? If we do get new relationship opportunities during a Venus retrograde, I always say take it slow. Proceed with caution. You don't know if it's just going to last during the duration of the Aries retrograde and oh gosh, the sex is good, or are we going to review it? Are we going to be careful so that perhaps we can set it up for long term? Of course, Mars rules Aries first house. Mars is the instinctive acting upon our sexuality. So a Venus retrograde in Aries, all kinds of sexuality issues are going to arise that are going to need to be reviewed. Passions can flare up. We're going to have to review equal giving and receiving sexually across the board. We're going to have, there's going to be a need to balance freedom and commitment in relationships. Retrograde Aries pointing towards Libra. Even the best of relationships, two people still have to be independent. They still have to have a degree of freedom to pursue themselves so they have something to bring and feed to the relationship. So this will then also bring up the need to balance time alone with ourselves as much as balance it with our relationship if we're in an intimate relationship. And because so much can become topsy-turvy, especially Venus retrograde in Aries, there can be more pressure to work on the relationship, and at the same time, I just want to be alone, please. So how do we honor that instinctive back and forth and let it ebb and flow however it's coming through versus taking it to those extremes of taking it out on someone else? Of course, in regards to the Venus retrograde, bringing up all of the sexuality issues, everything has to evolve, and it's going to be unique to each of us, pertaining to our natal Venus, our natal Mars, whereas transiting Venus in your chart right now with this retrograde cycle in Aries, Pisces, those are going to bring up some of the themes in which your sexual needs and desires may be changing. So Libra polarity is going to be extremely important. Talk it out. Talk, 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 talk it out. I'll give you the dates in a little bit. We're going to have a Mercury retrograde in Taurus Aries at the end of the Venus retrograde. So that's when the communications will become even more important. We can have extremely erratic sexual energy with Venus retrograde in Aries. We can need more sex. We can have sex fly out the window. We can have frustrations build up. And of course, a natural way is to release it sexually. If no one's around, we're not in a relationship, it's our own responsibility. That word masturbation. Recognizing sexual self-sufficiency. Maybe there's a degree of taking care of our own needs versus putting pressure upon our partner if they're in the middle of a quarter of school and they got 2 weeks of midterms to deal with. Maybe they're the ones that need sex. We have to look at how we want to project our sexual demands upon others and how our others are putting those projections back onto us and call them out both directions. And of course, you can tell just by some of the news that's going on. There are gender issues review, and are we going to de-evolve collectively or evolve? A lot of what I've been reading lately is, President Trump says we're going to take the transgender equality issues and give it back to the states. We're not going to have the protections that President Obama read into it when he was in office. Yet what I've been reading, and this even includes our own state of South Dakota, which became real close to passing a bathroom law, a lot of states have been turning down those laws because of how the social and corporate masses stood up in North Carolina. And they're saying, no, we'll just let the local school boards deal with it, or whatever ways we're going to look at it. And of course, and there's more to this, but you get the point of what I'm saying and how you may be seeing it working personally in your world. But we also will have a review of the traditional male and female roles. Are we going to defend them? Women need to stay home, cook and clean, men bring home the bacon, or are they going to evolve? If you're in relationship and heterosexual, do you have traditional roles that have run their course? And it's the stay-at-home dad because the woman is, bringing home the bacon. Where are we trying to be as equal as possible? One of the things that naturally evolved for Leroy and I is he does a lot of the cooking because I tend to be working a little more with clients and phone calls and, just working with the things I have to do running two home-based businesses. However, I have tried to pick up, if he cooks, I clean. And sometimes I'm the wash and he dries, but so I'm so grateful that we're way beyond traditional roles. But even with the Venus retrograde cycle, it can sometimes be, or even day to day, honey, I got this thing going on. Couldn't you take care of that household chore while I take care of this? Vice versa, male to female. We're we're moving into more and more gender equality in general, especially, equal pay for men and women. And so there are a lot of intimate relationships. If you have, intimate with two males or two females, is one going to go to the traditional, or are you both just going to learn how to redefine that? All of that stuff comes up in the air during Venus retrograde in Aries. Now, when Venus moves retrogrades back into Pisces, which it's going to be in Pisces April 2nd to the 28th, going direct April 15th, again, 27 Pisces. We're going to go back and start the deep, deep reviews of values here. And probably one of the most deepest ones that's going to come is an inner loneliness. So this is going to always reflect unresolved spiritual needs, Venus. So if you're feeling any loneliness during this Venus retrograde, and especially when it goes back into Pisces, it is an opportunity for you to recognize that there's no substitutes for a relationship with Universal Source. What is it that you need to do to connect with Source energy again in order to feel a deep, deep spiritual love, to feel a deep emotional connection with Source that will then allow an inner peace to come over, that will allow your Venus inner relationship with yourself to flourish, to find, again, that inner peace, that well-being, that sense of love. Those who have followed my interpretations of EA know that I'm fond of the cliche, the relationship you have with yourself is identical to the relationship you have with God Goddess. And the relationship you have with God Goddess is identical to the relationship you have with yourself. They are one and the same. It's an inside job. So this Venus retrograde, when it goes back into Pisces, we're looking for the ultimate lover here. We're looking for the ultimate relationship, ourself/source. So we're going to review any beliefs we have about this inner relationship we have with ourself and source. And this is going to include the fact that it's okay to have needs. That Pisces, Florence Nightingale sacrificing everything for other with no healthy boundary. Excuse me. Venus retrograde in Pisces, you're still going to have your own needs and desires that you haven't yet exhausted them. You can search for the inspiration on what it is that's coming to the surface for you in regards to your values and needs, and how to go about meeting those needs and desires. You're going to review your beliefs about outer relationships with others. And of course, it's going to bring that famous conditional love, that Libra, giving and receiving. I will love you if. And as we will see with that Virgo polarity, we can have all of the self-sacrificing in order to be loved. No, this Venus retrograde in Pisces, it's going to expose our unhealthy boundaries. It's going to expose where there's not giving and receiving on an equal basis. We're going to review our beliefs about our desire nature in general. This is Aries reversing to Pisces. Yeah, Aries reversing to Pisces. Aries, first house, ruler Mars, is the instinctive desire to become the leading edge of our desired nature, be it separating or returning desires. So we can be filtering through separating desires that we've exhausted and we want to release. We can be recognizing new separating desires that we've not yet achieved. They're still there. They're unfinished. And it's okay in natural law. And oh, by the way, the last separating desire we exhaust is sexuality. Only 1 to 2% of souls on the planet are naturally celibate, and they are the avatars. They have come through any and all sexual separating desires, and they finally are ready to shed. It's not something we can pray perfect. We may also notice an emerging level of the returning desire to know source come in some way. And it can be as simple as wanting to do volunteer work for your local homeless shelter. It can be, there can be all kinds of manifestations and actions in this outer world that could be a baby step forward in reconnecting with source. Again, ultimately the path to source is the exhaustion of the separating desires. And so for each of us, it'll be reflected in deep ways. Venus retrograde in Pisces, and no judgments here, Virgo polarity. It's going to ebb and flow however it's unique for each of us. And of course, here's an old book cover right here that I thought I'd remind you of. When God Was a Woman by Merlin Stone. I'm sure you could get this quite easily on Amazon if you wanted to. And I thought I'd put in 5,000-year-old statue of a Venus figurine. These are always known as the fertility statues. And I love this picture of an old crone, female crone. This is the artist of it for Venus retrograde in Pisces. You know, the ultimate mother and female goddess. And all of us, regardless of our gender, could be wanting to get in touch with the feminine energy in this way on a deep, deep level. You know, it can represent some of the most inclusive energies that we could be searching for if we're upset and lost from the chaos going on out there in the world politically from the US election. I'm going to take a quick little drink here before we start looking at the Venus polarity. So of course, as we're reviewing these beliefs, values, desires, we need to do it through the principles of compassion, gentleness, support, and cup half full. These are positive Virgo words. And this then allows us to release the guilt, conditioned or natural, that comes from that Pisces Virgo polarity. It can allow us to kind of see where we have this inner outer criticism and release it. And that's going to allow us to then self-love on deep inner levels through any and all imperfections. And of course, as we're recognizing any renewal of connection to Source, Venus retrograde in Pisces, that connection must be practiced every day and every moment. And I call it SMEP. It must be practiced on a spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical level, including diet, exercise, and rest. So how will the Venus retrograde polarity in Virgo affect your health routine as you take better care of your body temple? And of course, this will be searching for inner acknowledgement from Source. It's not to see it in that world outside of us. It's reflected out there. It's found inward first. And so can the Virgo polarity point help Venus reach a deeper level of inner love? We need to reach for objectivity. Again, the polarity sign of a retrograde planet points to objectivity in general. So when this polarity is Virgo, what we want to review and throw off, here again, self-critical patterns of relating, inner and outer, self-doubt, never good enough, inferiority complexes. This Venus retrograde in Pisces can trigger this stuff. Rigid standards of right, wrong conduct that create these conditioned guilt patterns via these distorted beliefs. We need to review and throw off judging our imperfect self against a perfect God and or more perfect others, that Libra polarity. We have to be careful of over-analyzing ourselves as being less than. Virgo Pisces, the sadomasochistic distortions in relationships and sexuality, a crisis orientation to reality. During that time period, what was it, April 2nd to 28th, when Venus is retrograde in Pisces, we have to be careful of the crises coming up and, letting things build up to that, to where we bust out again. Can we breathe? Can we love? Can we calm down? We have to watch out for workaholism, especially when it compensates for any imperfections or doubts or less than. Venus is going to relate to resources because of it being earth element via Taurus. We must make a consistent effort to manifest any of these evolving resource needs. Venus retrograde in general can bring in some of the work and career issues because the Venus inner rulership of Taurus in second house is going to be natural talents and resources. I have a talent to be an astrologer. Someone else has a talent to be a wood maker. Someone else has a talent as a bookkeeper. Venus retrograde is going to bring this ability to manifest resources into being. And through the polarity Virgo, we must make the effort. So new desires, Aries will manifest, new determinations, new self-efforts, Virgo polarity. And Virgo polarity, we must be careful to judge the effort, not the outcome. In other words, it's the purity of the effort we make to self-improve and to improve our financial lot in life or improve our ability to create resources. It's the effort we make, not how successful we are. And if we're making our best effort, we can feel the sense of gratitude from that. Venus, I'm doing the best I can. And that's good enough for source energy. As long as the effort is made, that's the biggest value. And as this nodal axis is finishing up, South Node in Pisces, North Node in Virgo, what are any evolving career and work values and goals that we've been trying to improve upon, North Node Virgo? So again, as you can see here, the inner side of Venus, that evolving self-worth to create it. We also must make an effort to honor and value that ability to create in everyone else. We must honor others evolving their efforts to improve their resources. And so we want to here find then a unique creative role that supports others. There's the service part of Virgo that supports society. And when we're making that effort, that will come back to us. The Libra side of Venus, it will be reciprocated back. Now, as Venus then from April 28th through June 6th moves back into Aries and turns direct April 15th. No, yeah, it turns direct April 15th, but past the retrograde when we're looking at this. Well, let me clarify. Venus retrograde. We're going to be working through these couple of slides while Venus turns retrograde in Aries. And Venus is in Aries February 3rd through April 2nd, 2 months, halfway through, intensifying as Venus turns retrograde 13 degrees Aries. And then we'll come back and revisit it April 28th through June 6th, all the way through May. The polarity point in Libra, of course, relationship changes and evolution. Here again, Venus retrograde, our values are evolving, which evolves our needs, which evolves our desires. And this will happen specifically in relationships. And due to the cardinal modality, it's not just intimate relationships. It doesn't skip you if you're single. This Libra is the diversity of relationships. So it's going to include friends, family, of course the intimate lover. It's going to include work. It's going to include society. And here again, one more reminder. The sexual needs and desires are changing, especially for equality. Equal giving and receiving sexually. The polarity point in Libra is learning to objectify ourselves. Rather than always from our own perspective, can we step outside ourselves and see us reflected through others? Can we objectify our relationship to life in general, as well as these relationships I mentioned here? Can we understand our role and responsibility in any relating scenario? In any Venus retrograde scenario we may be going through. The Libra polarity is objectivity. You don't get to do the Aries crybaby, I'm the victim. No. What's your role in whatever the relationship is? Person, place, situation. We also have an ability to recognize where we have been projecting onto others and projecting what we expect from them in any relationship. So we'll do this to others. Others will project their expectations onto us. And through communications, we're going to reflect this back and forth to each other. Again, hopefully achieving more and more equality in our world and our relationships. This is the goddess Themis, who is the goddess of justice. This is a sculpture here by Michael Dean. So I thought there's that emphasis of the polarity there. Now, this Libra polarity, of course, is going to bring the psychology of listening. The lessons in being able to listen and hear it from the perspective of another. However, again, if we're on the self list, learning how to speak up whenever necessary. So I just put a little example in here, the Gottman relationship blog. Reactive listening versus active. Reactive. No, I didn't. Absolutely not. I never. Well, at least I don't. That's not true. I always, blah, blah, blah. Now, active listening, what did you mean by? Tell me more about it. What specifically bothered you about? So you're saying that. In other words, instead of jumping in and reacting and arguing, Aries, we learn how to continue the conversation and speak about it some more, hoping to achieve greater understanding of what that person is saying so that we can have, again, giving from their perspective to be given to from our perspective, and evolving that lesson of equality. Now, the polarity point in Libra for this Venus retrograde also means we need to explore a diversity of relationships. I have to improve upon this one myself because, and I really appreciate my dear partner for saying, Kim Marie, you're not acting any better than, the old wing person when you make a comment like that, because I've been feeling this Aries Libra polarity myself and drawing lines in the sand, and I'm not going to shut up anymore. I'm always, my Mars in Libra is always trying to be so nice to everybody else, and my Jupiter in Libra is always trying to understand their point of view, and I'm like, I'm going to speak up, and if they don't like it, tough, tough, tough. And so all of us, we're hearing this a lot on the alternative perspective. Okay, can we understand where this person is coming from? If we can see where they voted against their own best financial interests, can we understand where they're coming from and then have conversation with them to rephrase it a little better? Oh, what's that book that was published last year and was towards the end of the election really came out? I want to say J.D. Vance was the author, and the book was something about being a hillbilly from Kentucky, and it was the psychology about how a lot of the Trump voters voted and why they voted that way. So, here again, we have to be careful about going overboard just to the point where we make excuses for them because they just don't know any better. And we also then have to open up and try and understand, and then see if we can have conversations that can improve things. I've seen a lot of progressive social issues speak about this before the election as much as after the election. Then this Venus retrograde cycle is going to carry the next 19 months. And so how is this really going to be taking place for you? Again, the next Venus retrograde cycle is going to be Scorpio Libra, so we'll see where that falls when it really starts bringing up all of, the next election cycle. And I never got that slide out, but hold on, I got my little ephemeris here. I can quickly look that up for you. Oh, isn't this interesting? The next Venus retrograde cycle after this one, Venus turns retrograde October 5th, 2018, 11 degrees Scorpio, and Venus goes direct November 16th at 25 Libra. The midterm elections, November 6th, 2018, will have Venus retrograde at 27 degrees Libra. Will we be more polarized? Will we see another pendulum swing as we see in the midterm elections? At the very least, there is some level of acceptance of difference in one another, personally and collectively. So how can we acknowledge and accept others intimately and in society? Understand what they need, give freely without motivation. Can we understand what society needs? So here we are again, choice point to degenerate into more extreme polarities or mature into civility. Stay tuned, yet to be written. The polarity point, of course, also points to a desire of freedom to act upon the sexual instinct with others. So the Venus retrograde in Aries, we have an increase in the sexual instinct. It's a retrograde planet in Aries. I need my release. So Libra polarity, it becomes very important to understand sexual karma and honesty. You Pluto Libras, it's not just about, friends with benefits and there's no consequences. Can you really, think before jumping in to bed with someone you just met, Venus retrograde? Can you work towards greater role equality sexually? Is one person always serving the other? Is one person always giving and the other one always receiving in the relationship, hetero or homo? Doesn't matter. It's got to be equal giving and receiving. That's what Libra's pointing to in regards to sexuality. Then, of course, we may have those famous outside attractions. And if we're in a primary relationship, the outside attraction represents what is missing. Honesty with both attractions is needed. If we're in a primary relationship, we're attracted outside. What attracts us? We bring that back to the primary relationship and speak to our primary partner about it, and we make the best effort to evolve Venus retrograde. If for some reason partner is unwilling or unable, then you're karmically free to move on to the outside attraction. If you're unwilling to make the effort with the primary relationship and you just want to end it and go forward, you're increasing karma with both partners, the primary and the outside. And so, as we know, we have a lot of relationship buildup here, so perhaps we can take a little bit of time and slow down in this case, maybe, perhaps, hopefully. Here are the dates. I thought I had this at the beginning, and I realized instead of copying it, I moved it. And so I'm sorry that I didn't give this to you earlier. But here we can see now, I'm going to move through the aspects that Venus makes, and we'll finish up with the collective. Hope you're hanging in there okay. Maybe I should take a break and ask Leroy any questions or anything while I take a drink. So as you can see on your screen, again, the dates from Pisces to Aries, back to Pisces to Aries, and finishes up. Here's the first movement, Venus pre-shadow from January 30th, going retrograde March 4th. The interior conjunction, the retrograde from the March 3rd to April 15th, March 4th, April 15th. And then here is the post-shadow from April 15th to May 18th. So this whole Venus retrograde cycle with 3 passages from 27 Pisces to 13 Aries is about February, March, April, 3.5 months here for all 3 of these. So, it's not necessarily a short retrograde cycle, even though it only comes every 1.5 years. There is a long, there's several months to it. Here's where Venus turns stationary retrograde March 4th, 2:08 a.m. in my time zone of Rapid City, South Dakota. I wanted to point out that there's some major aspect configurations taking place in the background. Of course, we're all familiar with this cardinal T-square, Jupiter's opposition to Uranus, T'd by Pluto squaring both of them. Just the fact that Jupiter is in Libra and it's already retrograde in Libra. It's retrograde through Venus is going to, Jupiter's going to go direct before Venus, I think. Don't quote me on that one. But the point is, the Libra Aries emphasis right here is also going to key in to emphasizing everything we've talked about archetypically in the previous slides. And the T-square from Pluto, it can trigger who gets to have the control if you're in relationships. Who gets to have the control? Of course, your boss, but is it to the point that, no, I can't do this anymore, it's time to move on? If it's a partner or if it's a family member, how do we stand up? Or could it be possible, I mean, there'll be those who'll be having situations where Venus retrograde in Aries, it's time to break free from the family. Who knows? It's, unique to everybody. We also, of course, have the backdrop of Saturn making its last quarter squares to Chiron, finishing up the whole honesty issue, the beliefs issue, the victimization issue. And we have the backdrop of the Saturn waning trines to Uranus taking place here, which will bring about all the honesty issues, which will, stir things up just a little bit, especially the I'm right, no, I'm right, no, I'm right. Let me tell you what to believe, and let me tell you what to think, and let me tell you what to do. That fiery energy of those trines it can really stir up this Venus retrograde. The positive potential is to really get to some deep truth, Saturn and Sag, about ourself with these Venus and other planets, Uranus, Mars, retrograde in Aries as well. Now, during this Venus retrograde cycle, Venus is going to make waxing squares to Saturn itself, waxing semi-sextiles to Neptune. The North Node is going to make a waning inconjunct. Oh, that's wrong. That's 210. I got to change that one. Waning is the outer inconjunct, which is 210 degrees, okay? And the South Node will make waxing semi-sextiles to Venus. Of course, Mercury, 3 different waning and waxing aspects to Venus. There will be a Mercury-Venus conjunction. There always is during a Venus retrograde. And Venus will make 3 different waning aspects to Mars. Sometimes there's conjunctions and oppositions with Mars, sometimes there's not. Of course, the highlight of any Venus retrograde cycle is that interior conjunction with the Sun. This one is March 25th, 5 degrees Aries. This is the time period, let's just say maybe the week of, so 3-4 days before and after this interior conjunction. This is the time period to really get the highlights or ahas of what we're pondering. What is of value and importance to ourselves, Aries, from the feedback, Libra, and what it is that is motivating us to move forward in our world, in our life. Now, I just included this here for another reminder for you. The heliacal rising then comes just a few days after, and this is at 2.5 degrees, so a little more review here, but you can see how these blend together into being a potent time period for the beginnings and initiations of how we do move forward. And this is an interior conjunction, so the birth by intent, rebirth by intent, if you want to call that. And I just included some Aries words. Initiation of our new needs. That halfway point, the interior conjunction with Venus, you can start moving forward when you get to that point with the Sun. You have that burst of creative energy with the Sun. It will be a rebirth of the feminine archetype because it's Venus retrograde in general, but with Aries, again, the Amazon warrior, the warrior goddess, that initiative energy. And of course, how are we moving forward with freedom in our world personally? It's not a be-all or an end-all, but you get the point of the interior conjunction, the ahas, the highlights, the beginnings of moving forward. We'll still review, we can still fine-tune, but we've got some energy to make our choice points and take action, Aries, if we want, between these 2 dates right here. Now, here is that interior conjunction to the Sun when it happens at 5 degrees. This is, again, March 25th. It's 4:06 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. Yahoo! Mountain Daylight Time. I wanted to point out that all the way through this Venus retrograde cycle, there is the orb of a grand trine going on. And that trine is Uranus to Saturn, which we spoke about earlier. But I just kind of want to point out that the nodal axis as it finishes up in Virgo Pisces is making a trine as well. South node sextiling. Mercury's going to be right with Uranus during this aha time period taking place with the interior conjunction. The nodes move into Leo Aquarius, I think it's either May 7th or May 9th. So the post-shadow time period for Venus as it's direct. But I want to point out that this grand trine with 2 and fire signs can also be a potent time period for you, questing for truth, questing for that spark of life that allows you to move forward during this Mercury retrograde. Now here's the aspects with Mercury, and I included all the way through the pre and post shadows. Mercury can get as far as 60 degrees apart from Venus, all right? And it's behind Venus right now, and it goes from 60 degrees apart to 45 degrees apart, 30 degrees apart as Venus is retrograde going backwards. Mercury's conjunction to Venus is the 18th. Remember the interior conjunction with the Sun, the 25th, helioacal rising, the 29th. Can you see how these last 10 days of March are starting to provide that Aryan energy? And yes, we'll have the Pisces reflections to the finishing up of the Venus retrograde, but we can get that sparks of what is new, what's evolving in our needs and values, and review it and get a really good moving forward. The beauty of this Venus retrograde is we don't have a Mars retrograde after it that slows everything down. We can actually do something with this Venus retrograde as it goes direct. So here again, conjunctions to sextiles is as far as they can get apart. Venus can get up to 47, 48 degrees away from the Sun from Earth. Mercury can get 28, 29 degrees apart from the Sun. So that's why you never get more than 30-degree aspects to your Mercury Sun, and 45 to 0-degree aspects Venus Sun. But Mercury Venus is communicating what we are learning from our evolving self-love and outer love efforts. As we're reviewing inner-outer relationships, Mercury's always going to be in the picture, asking us to communicate it. And what's Mercury going to do? Mercury, before Venus goes direct, April 15th, Mercury's going to have a retrograde April 9th to May 3rd. I'll show you that free class here at the end. From 5 Taurus to 24 Aries. So Mercury is also going to get involved in emphasizing the communications as we are moving forward. So as Mercury goes from waning to waxing, old communication ideas and styles are going to break down, and it's going to bring forth new ideas and styles of communicating. So Mercury's also going to emphasize learning to listen and hear from another's perspective, honoring our freedom in self and others. Again, those honest communications that take place. If we're not, we're going to have the opposite. We're going to have the distortions of not listening, interrupting, the lies in the stories, that grand trine taking place, overpowering, underpowering, protecting our own self-interest at all costs. Mercury initiating that retrograde in Taurus. We could be dishonest about our resources and resources in relationships with others. Of course, if we're really making the honest communications, we can be recognizing new values with resources, perhaps new ways of creating resources ourselves and with others. Excuse my burp. The Venus retrograde with Mars, there's two aspects while Venus is retrograde, and I decided I'd just put in the rest of the aspects because they're not going to make a conjunction till October 5th, 19 degrees Virgo. The Venus-Mars cycle is 24 to 28 months, and every Venus-Mars cycle will have between 1 to 3 conjunctions, and they'll always have one opposition when Mars is retrograde. Because remember, Mercury and Venus are never far from the Sun. So when Mars is opposite the Sun, so does Venus oppose Mars and Mercury. So Venus is starting out 30 degrees behind the Sun, falls 45, falls 60 degrees behind, and then it catches up until it makes the conjunction. So Venus being behind Mars through all of this is a good time. Again, here's all this review, but I said we don't have a Mars retrograde, so we can get some energy in moving forward with our needs, Venus. And if we continue to ponder that, when Venus makes this conjunction to Mars in the fall in Virgo, we could actually be full steam ahead on really making some improvements in relationships Venus-Mars, in achieving some of our goals and desires Venus-Mars. This is the courage, this planetary pair in general, courage to honor our own evolving relationship needs and desires. The Venus review behind Mars, what old karma mate or new cycle of relationship is starting? There's a mutual reception in each other's signs during Venus retrograde aspects to Mars. Venus in Aries, Mars in Taurus. Mutual receptions here. There's a potential with that mutual reception then, more objectivity and equality as we talk about what's changing for me and you and what we each want in our relationships, intimate or otherwise. There could also, again, good old distortions of selfishness, including along sexuality, Venus-Mars. The passions can run strong with this mutual reception in each other's signs. It's really going to create a need for, again, that absolute honesty and the mercurial communications that need to take place again and again, however. I wanted to point out the Jupiter opposition, the Venus opposition to Jupiter. And I want you to notice these dates here. Jupiter's already retrograde. It went retrograde January 6th at 23 Libra. Venus goes retrograde, as we know, at 13 Aries. Venus has an opposition to Jupiter after its direct May 19th at 14 Aries Libra. And then Jupiter turns direct June 9th at 13 degrees Libra. Hope I was saying the Aries Libra right. In other words, the Venus retrograde issues will be resolved by the time Jupiter turns direct. So we have increased opportunities for new beginnings from the perspective of objectivity. The Libra polarity for Venus retrograde, the Aries polarity for Jupiter retrograde in Libra. There can be a real expansion in our understanding of relationships and how to move forward. The distortions can just be increased polarizations. Just think about it collectively with these political and inclusive versus exclusive groups we have collectively in the U.S. We can have the distortions of selfishness or giving too much, compromising due to our neediness, not wanting to be alone. We can be adopting others' beliefs versus our own. But this is, even though they don't have an aspect till Venus is direct, and it's, I think if I remember correctly, finishes up its shadow, what was it? May 18th, the day after Venus leaves its shadow. Of course, 13 degrees Aries, duh. It has an opposition to Jupiter. My point is, these two planets in Aries Libra can be quite strong throughout this Venus retrograde, even without the exact aspects till the tail end. Me versus you. How are we going to balance that? Freedom versus commitment. Giving and receiving. Expanding all our beliefs on a conscious level, Jupiter, and our understandings of this. Here's the Venus 3 waxing squares to Saturn and the dates. This is the courage to be deeply honest with ourself and others. Saturn and Sag, tail end. Distortions, we can have betrayals of trust around lies. Belief systems can be no longer compatible. Can we search for a common ground with our evolving values? Relationships must be based upon some degree of sharing common beliefs. It's hard to have a relationship if someone's conservative and the other person's liberal. If you're polar opposite with what's going on in your value systems, it's hard to create anything together. And so Venus at that waxing square, crises in action, I've got to, here, I have to be completely responsible for myself. That's a Venus-Saturn planetary pair. And the waxing square, I've got to be acting it out. And so this can have its effect on relationships. It can have the relationship Y in the road. Excuse me. I'm going to take a drink. Thank you. I'm talking so much. I also do my little lozenge to coat my throat. So thank you for letting any background noises come through.
You want to take a little break, Kim, while I do a little plug?
Sure.
Just to let everybody know that we have an educational webinars page that is not time sensitive like these forecasting webinars. So it's on that webinars drop down menu on the homepage. You go to educational webinars. I was just impressed with the amount of content we've been posting there for the last, 7 or 8 years. But I wanted to draw that attention to that page because there's a lot of relationship webinars available there. Again, you'll get the PDF a lot like we will provide you at the end of this webinar with all the media links. The audio and video links is what we call media links, plus the PDF that you can print out all the slides. And I'm just thinking of those old conference webinars that we produced back in 2013. They're not old, they're still very current. There's also your chakra series is posted on that page. So feel free to go and take a look at the educational webinars page. Again, it will not be like a forecasting webinar that's time sensitive, so that information is great forever. And you got to scroll down the page to get all the content there. So I just kind of wanted to give everybody a heads up on that because I don't notice a lot of clicks on that educational webinars page lately. So I wanted to give a little promo on that.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me time to coat my throat, sweetie.
Yeah, and we just also, the top of the list is your Populous Banking Solution webinar, which addresses those financial issues that we're talking about, which is also a Venus archetype. So I guess I wanted to point that out. You'll see that first in the list.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, the Venus waxing squares to Saturn are going to put a seriousness to this Venus retrograde. You know, the Venus retrograde in Aries, it's, you know, the initiation, the passion, the instinct, this is what I want to change in my world, and we're reviewing all that, and we're reviewing all of our relationships. And then as we've seen, when Venus moves back into Pisces, we've got to recognize that absolute relationship, the ultimate relationship, which is with Source. You know, the ultimate Venus retrograde value is God Goddess. And so when Venus moves back into Pisces and makes these waxing squares to Saturn throughout April, this is the serious month for the relationships. And we've got to be honest with ourselves, and again, what our needs and evolving values are, so that we can then communicate that with others, be it an intimate lover or the parent or the child or the friend or the neighbor across the street. You know, Venus retrograde is all relationships. And so take those time periods to reflect. Do I have my feet on the ground? Am I really loving myself? What are the changes I need to make in my world to just feel inner peace? And what steps am I making to create what I want? Absolute self-responsibility. And if we utilize that through these Venus-Saturn squares, then boy, we can really make the steps forward through this Venus retrograde as Venus goes direct. We can get clarity on whether or not a relationship has ran its course and it's just not there anymore. It's a natural ending. Or we took the time to create a natural beginning because we didn't just jump into bed with sex. We took time to create a healthy foundation of honesty around beliefs and values and who's responsible for what as we took those steps forward in the new beginnings. Now, oops, gotta click my thing here. Venus makes 3 waxing semi-sextiles. Venus moves 30 degrees beyond Neptune. 3 waxing semi-sextiles to Neptune. This is the courage to act, Aries, upon the evolution of our beliefs, Neptune and Pisces, on the deepest levels possible. So, what we have is when our beliefs evolve, what's important to us or what we value evolves. And then from our values, we perceive our needs and our desires. And Neptune in Pisces is taking us down to some of the deepest levels of our own personal beliefs. The distortion of that is the distortion of beliefs, or denial of beliefs, and head in the sand or conditioned beliefs via consensus religions. But for many of us, Venus lower octave of love, Neptune higher octave of love. As Venus had the conjunction with Neptune, which I don't quite remember, about a month ago, maybe, and now it's this 30 degrees. That is a gestation aspect, and it's in Aries. And so this Venus retrograde, and especially as it goes back into Pisces, we have to go back to our beliefs on the deepest levels possible for us personally. Show me the truth, show me the truth, show me the truth, and get in touch with that. And then Venus retrograde in Aries, how are we going to walk our talk? How are we going to act upon those beliefs? Now, distortion, Venus in Aries, well, I already know it all. I don't need to change my beliefs. You know, those a-holes on the other side of the political spectrum, they do. My partner, yeah, he's the dummy. You know, we have to be careful of thinking we know it all here or refusing to change. Human love must be compatible with universal love. And so we can have, this is a subtle aspect that can have a long-lasting effect upon our relationships if and when any warning signs are ignored. Example, we have a new relationship on the horizon, excitement, passion of meeting somebody new, and the communications and talking and fun and activities together. And you get these little sparks that this potential partner is not as open-minded as we are, and we ignore it. We're caught up in the excitement. Then it's quite possible down the road we can have some raging arguments around the limitations of beliefs. So you want to pay attention here that as our evolving values, needs, and desires are happening, and if or when we're in relationship, our human love is compatible with universal love. Our relationships fit into our beliefs on the deepest levels possible. Again, we can have distortions around this with telling lies, making excuses. I don't want to look at this. I'm too, codependent. I want a lover. Again, can easily blow up in your face if you're not paying attention to your subtle messages that are taking place here. As I said, Venus with the nodal axis, it's waning in conjunction to the North Node. South Node is making a waxing semi-sextile to Venus. We're breaking free from old relating patterns based upon inequalities. That whole victim-victor sadomasochism distortions. And what we have to be careful of is either ourself or our partner unwilling to change the patterns. We have to be careful of us or the other self-sabotaging the relationship, clinging to old ways for those emotional security reasons. In other words, the nodal axis aspects to Venus in conjunct semi-sextile, they're again a little more subtle. They're not as tense or tension-filled as Venus square Saturn. And so we might want to ignore where we're having to change. And what the nodal axis is going to bring into the picture by virtue of the nodes of the moon is our emotions. Are we paying attention to the emotional discomforts or subtle clues that may be happening in our world with any relationships? We have to have that courage to review, let go of old guilt patterns based upon false, limited, or conditioned beliefs. Because again, with Venus retrograde back into Pisces, we're reviewing all of these deeply held beliefs, which is what the South Node in Pisces has been doing for the last year and a half. So Venus is going to touch into that and say, what have I learned? Especially around relationship beliefs and relationship patterns. Do I have an ability to Pay attention to those subtle emotions and make the changes as necessary. Or do I re-imprint all the old cycles all over again? The choice is going to be up to each of us. Now, Pluto generations, those born between 1969 to 1978, Pluto Virgos, Pluto Libras, they're going to have Venus retrograde their natal Pluto between 1 to 3 times. So it's necessary for self-reliance on the deepest levels possible. Codependencies, projections, expectations, these are going to be emphasized for you guys if you have these Venus-Pluto oppositions, and they will be exposed to evolve the equality in your relationships, intimate and otherwise. And for you guys specifically, if you're in a relating commitment, it can be challenged. Polarity, Venus-Pluto. Ultimate self-reliance, Venus-Pluto, in achieving our own needs and desires. And so that the relationship, it must evolve, or you will re-imprint and increase the karma. Venus retrograde is throwing off all that old, unequal relating stuff. If you were born between 1935 to 1949, you're going to have Venus make waning trines to Pluto 1 to 3 times. It's going to be Pluto Cancers, Pluto Leos. There's a potential for the retrograde themes to be more easily evolved, resolved, or more easily resisted. Hard to resist these oppositions right here and the need for equality. You guys have it a little bit easier. Will you make the effort as best as you possibly can? Now, I just highlighted a couple generations. I don't have the time to go through all of them, but I want to move into the U.S. chart and Donald Trump charts, and that'll be the last of our charts, finishing up this retrograde class. I use the U.S. Gemini rising chart, which is 2:13 a.m. on July 4th. Oh, I used my Washington D chart instead of Philadelphia. I'm going to be off a little bit on the degrees. Apologies for that. I'm going to make a note on this. I got to just eliminate the Washington chart. But February, March, May, Venus, here's transiting Venus in the outer circle. Venus will make waning squares to the U.S., Venus, Jupiter, and Sun in Cancer, second house here. Think about that. Venus, everything we've learned about values and needs and the review of what we are. And using this Gemini chart, transiting Venus is in the 11th house. There's potential for objectivity, or the distortions of the 11th house is progressives versus conservatives and those in the middle. But Venus last quarter square here, this is our collective groups from both perspectives. What's important to us? What about our resources? Who is our identity right now? If you've been following the news over the last couple of days, the increase in, I don't know if I pronounced the word right, anti-Semitism, the anti-Jewish, there was a second graveyard. As a matter of fact, I think this one was in Philadelphia, where there were a whole bunch of Jewish graves that were desecrated today. There were 21 threats to Jewish institutions today, from schools to, do Jews have mosques? I think they do. I apologize if I have that wrong. Their religious buildings. I mean, really, I'm sorry. I'm just going to be blunt here. These are prejudiced racial people that have been stirred up during the Donald Trump campaign, who not only think it's okay you know, talk out about Muslims and immigrants, now they're attacking Jewish people. I mean, the racism that is going on here, and you know, the 11th house is being able to recognize broad groups of people and the unity and diversity. So is Venus retrograde going to initiate unity and diversity, or is it initiating the intensity of racism? What do we value here? And so are we going to isolate, which is distortion of the second house, protectionism, which is Cancer? You know, part of what we've seen in this campaign with the Cancer Capricorn polarity is the rise in nationalism, not only in the US, but all over. Pluto and Capricorn has seen that rise in nationalism. So here is this emphasized. Stay tuned on a collective level as we watch Venus make the waning squares 3 times to the stellium. What evolves in the United States as a deeper value? Well, we see racism of all kinds intensify, or we see those coming together in other ways. And for instance, as I was checking this out on the news, when it happened in the first Jewish cemetery, or else their grave sites, there was a Muslim group who stood up for them. And there was another Muslim group and individuals who came forth today too and said, we're going to stand with you. Racism of any kind is not an American value. Stay tuned. We'll see how that happens. But here are the dates. Of course, we've already had the first ones. Here's the retrograde ones, which you can be observing. Here we are today, Venus square the Sun right now happening. And we'll see this next one coming, and then here's the third one. So I put the dates in there for you in case you would like to look at those. Also though, as we move along, let me back up a minute. We also has Venus moves further along in Aries after its retrograde cycle. It will have conjunction to Chiron, the oppositions to Saturn, which Jupiter retrograde is going to go over Saturn 3 times. It's going to have, Venus is going to square Mercury and Pluto. And so here are those aspects throughout May and June. So you can see Venus will continue after this retrograde cycle with the US chart. And I just put more of the hard angle aspects in here. So you can see there's a number of them here that will, again, continue this conversation of what do we value collectively as a country? How are we going to evolve as a country through this particular Venus retrograde cycle? I think we'll continue to see more distorted racist acts, more exclusionary me versus you stuff, Aries, Libra. I also think, though, Pisces, Virgo, we will see more and more people stand up. I think in the long term that Donald Trump is going to do more to bring every different perspective, progressive group together sooner or later under one umbrella. Hence my question mark resistance. Stay tuned as to the term we're going to create for ourselves. Here's Donald Trump's chart. At 9:51 a.m. time period for June 14th, 1946. Here again, February, March, May, same months. Venus is going to, here's Venus up here in the outer circle. Venus is going to oppose his Neptune 3 times. It's going to last quarter square his Mercury in Cancer 3 times. And it's going to waning trine his Pluto in Leo 3 times. Venus-Neptune oppositions, oh boy. I mean, as we watch this thin-skinned, consensus egotistical soul who's trying to, you know, clamp down on anybody and anything that says anything negative, let alone objective or truthful about him. It's his way or the highway. You know, he's going to be so caught up in all of his own distorted perspectives that I just don't even see him being able to objectify what's happening in his world. This Venus last quarter square to Neptune, if you just, those Trump supporters don't care if he lies. They don't take him literally. He stands up for their version of the U.S., that Mercury last quarter square Neptune. They idolize them. Trump gravitates towards them because his ego needs that adulation. Well, there's going to be some Venus oppositions here that are going to kick him in the butt. May they please go forward with an investigation to his campaign members talking or interacting with Russians. There's just going to be lie versus lie versus lie that come through here. Not to mention the possibility with 8th second house information about various resources. I just don't really see this gentleman having an objectivity to see truth. I'm sorry. You can call me prejudice and my own perspective in it. The Venus waning trines to Pluto. By virtue of his office, he is going to benefit with resources, and he's not going to be honest about it. He's the king. He doesn't have to. He's above it all. I can say whatever I want to say. We'll see how well Venus retrograde kicks him in the butt. Stay tuned. I won't go into it a lot. I don't need to belabor it. We're probably already into Trump fatigue. But here's the aspects of the opposition square and trine. Of course, February. Stay tuned for these in March during the retrograde, and then here they are visiting again in May. I think in some ways, whatever gets stirred up in this Venus retrograde, whatever gets stirred up in February and March, I think we'll see a lot of the resolutions come along in May and June. Here's Venus stationary direct April 15th. I wanted to point out, look at how close the Venus stationary direct is to Chiron. They will actually have a conjunction, I think, later on that same day. And so by the time Venus goes direct, have we resorted back to our victimization and powerlessness and sacrifice? Or have we really deepened and strengthened our ultimate connection to source energy? And if we have, this can be a strong, strong spiritual renewal here that we will take forward with us on planet Earth, that we will take forward into creating what we value on a personal level and on a collective level. However, then, May, all these Venus aspects for the third time to the U.S. chart, to Donald Trump's chart, to whatever's going to go on personally in your chart. And then we move into June, and we have Jupiter again going direct where Venus went retrograde. May, June. Those are going to be those months where we really understand what this Venus retrograde was all about. We see the resolutions, we see the new beginnings, we see the evolution of our values personally and collectively. Finally, I put this slide in again. The ultimate Venus retrograde condition is identification with God Goddess, the ultimate value. And of course, this is, even more emphasized as Venus retrogrades back into Pisces and makes that conjunction to Chiron. I mean, may you be so successful in your reconnection with source energy that this Venus retrograde allows you to go forward and be a most powerful force on planet Earth as a warrior goddess standing up for each and every species out there, standing up for fairness and equality to everything and everyone on planet Earth. All right, everyone. Thank you. I hope that this has been helpful for you. We always have the Mercury retrograde as a free class. It's going to take place Monday, April 3rd in Taurus, Aries. I will have a class May 1st as the nodal axis shifts into Leo, Aquarius. You're always welcome to email us with any ideas on classes. I had some ideas, but I've had a few winter projects that I just have needed to get me on so that I can focus more on writing, because I'm realizing that one of my evolving Venus values, needs, and other aspects in my chart is writing again. Here's all the aspects that are used in these various slides for you in a nice little chronological order. So you've got that as a PDF for you as you are moving through this Venus retrograde. Let me check in and see. Are there any questions, comments, Leroy? I'm always amazed how I can do these webinars in my 2-hour time period, regardless of how many slides I have. I don't pay too much attention to, I mean, I'll look at the time every once in a while, but
Well,
good job.
after about 300 or 400 of them, I guess we get pretty close. It's like waking up right before work, with the alarm clock. Okay. No, we're pretty good to go. Just a lot of some recognition and acknowledgement. Thank you for all the hard work, and it was a lot of great information for everybody.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Look forward to this handout as you move through this Venus retrograde. And again, I wish you all the best in your self-love journey and your relating and loving with your world and the world in general. All right. Until next time, everyone.